They told us range anxiety was the price of progress. They told us that if you wanted to drive electric, you accepted the fear, the anxiety of watching that battery percentage crawl downward on a motorway, the panic of planning every journey around a charging stop, the humiliation of sitting in a supermarket car park for 45 minutes, tethered to a cable like a dog on a lead, while petrol drivers pulled in, filled up, and left in 4 minutes flat. They told us this was simply the reality of electric vehicles. They told us the technology was not ready. They told us to be patient. They lied. Because while Tesla was collecting 50,000-pound deposits and calling itself the future, while Elon Musk was posting memes and the automotive press was handing out awards to a car whose charging speed had not fundamentally changed in a decade, engineers in Hangzhou, China were quietly building something that makes the Model Y look like a Victorian kerosene lamp dressed in a touchscreen, the Zeekr 7X. And what it does to range anxiety is not an improvement, it is an execution. Let us start with the number that every automotive journalist in the West has either ignored, downplayed, or quietly buried in a footnote. The Zeekr 7X charges at 500 kilowatts. 500, not the 250 kilowatts that Tesla calls supercharging, not the 350 kilowatts that Ioniq breathlessly announced as a revolution. 500 kilowatts of silicon carbide 800-volt architecture, pushing electrons into that battery pack at a rate that is physically closer to a fighter jet refueling than anything the Western automotive establishment has ever shipped to a customer. What does 500 kilowatts mean in human terms? You pull into a charging station, you pick up your phone, you open one email, you put the phone back down. You have just added 284 kilometers of range. In the time it takes you to read a push notification, a car that was almost empty is now more than half full. The charging problem is not solved, it is deleted. But the lie goes deeper than charging speed. And if you are watching this, you already know the establishment does not want you to look at what comes next. Range anxiety was never just about charging time. It was about the entire psychological architecture that electric car manufacturers spent 15 years building around their product's greatest weakness. Tesla did not solve range anxiety. Tesla monetized it. They built a proprietary charging network, locked it behind their ecosystem, and trained an entire generation of EV buyers to accept dependency as a feature. They called it the supercharger network. They should have called it what it is, a competitive moat built on the foundation of a problem they never genuinely tried to eliminate. Think about what Tesla sold you, not freedom, control. Your freedom was conditional on their infrastructure. Your range was a subscription to their geography. And the automotive press celebrated this as genius. They gave it awards. They wrote breathless profiles of the man at the top. They called it the future of mobility. Meanwhile, in a factory in Ningbo, Zeekr, a brand most Western journalists cannot even pronounce correctly, was doing something the industry said was physically impossible. The Zeekr 7X delivers 800 kilometers of real-world WLTP range, not the inflated, air-conditioned, perfectly flat motorway range that manufacturers print in brochures. 800 kilometers of honest, usable distance on a single charge. That is London to Edinburgh and back. That is Lahore to Karachi without a single stop. That is the complete psychological annihilation of every anxiety that has ever made a rational person hesitate before buying an electric vehicle. But here's what the press release will not tell you, and here's what most automotive commentators are structurally incapable of telling you because their access depends on keeping manufacturer relationships warm. The 800-kilometer range and the 500-kilowatt charging are not separate achievements. They are deliberately engineered together to destroy a specific psychological trap.
The battery in the Zeekr 7X uses a lithium iron phosphate cell chemistry with a gravimetric energy density of 192 watt-hours per kilogram, packaged in a cell-to-body structural integration architecture that eliminates the traditional battery tray entirely. The cells are the structure is the cells. It is the same philosophy that aerospace engineers used when they stopped bolting fuel tanks to aircraft and started making the wing itself hold the fuel. You gain weight, you gain rigidity, you gain space, you gain range, you gain everything simultaneously because you stopped thinking in the categories the old industry handed you. Tesla thought in categories. They took the cylindrical cells they knew from laptop computers, scaled them up, bolted them into a skateboard, and called it disruption. And for a decade, it was. But the Zeekr 7X is not disruption. Disruption implies you are working within someone else's game. This is replacement. This is a completely different game being played on the same pitch, and the old players have not realized the rules changed. Let us do the comparison that the automotive press is too polite to make directly. Park a 2026 Tesla Model Y next to a 2026 Zeekr 7X. Same broad segment, roughly similar external dimensions, both electric SUVs aimed at intelligent, forward-thinking buyers who want performance, range, and technology. The Model Y charges at 250 kilowatts on a good day at a V3 supercharger, achieving approximately 270 kilometers in 15 minutes. The Zeekr 7X charges at 500 kilowatts, achieving 510 kilometers in the same 15 minutes. Same clock, nearly double the outcome. The comparison is not a comparison anymore. It is a demonstration of which company spent the last decade solving the problem and which company spent the last decade selling you the waiting room. And the price? The Zeekr 7X enters the market at a figure that makes the Model Y's value proposition not just competitive, but structurally embarrassing. You are paying more for a car with half the charging speed, built by a company that treated your anxiety as a loyalty mechanism, rather than an engineering problem to be destroyed. Why has the Western automotive press not told you this? Ask yourself that question. Ask yourself why a car that achieves twice the charging speed of the world's most celebrated electric vehicle at a lower price point is not the headline on every major automotive publication this week. Ask yourself what those publications have to lose by telling you. The answer, if you are honest with yourself, is obvious. Now understand what Zeekr is. Not a startup, not a scrappy underdog born in a garage. Zeekr is a Geely brand. Geely, the company that owns Volvo, that owns Lotus, that owns Polestar, that quietly became one of the 10 largest automotive groups on the planet, while European executives were busy announcing their 15th consecutive delay to their own electric vehicle transitions. Zeekr was spun out specifically to do one thing: take the technology that took Geely 20 years to accumulate and deploy it without the weight of legacy thinking, legacy tooling, or legacy compromise. They did not inherit the problem, they inherited the solution. The 800-volt silicon carbide inverter architecture in this car, the component that makes 500 kilowatt charging physically possible, operates at switching frequencies that generate so little thermal waste that the cooling system required is 37% smaller than what a conventional 400-volt system demands. Smaller cooling system, more space, more range, less weight, less heat. It's engineering that compounds on itself, where every decision reinforces every other decision, and the cumulative result is a product that should not be possible at this price point, according to every assumption Western manufacturers built their R&D strategies around. And those manufacturers know it. Do not let anyone tell you this is a surprise in Stuttgart or Ingolstadt or Fremont. The boardrooms are not confused, they are afraid. BMW filed 43 patent applications related to 800-volt solid-state battery thermal management in 2024. 43! You do not file 43 patents in a technical domain because you think the threat is theoretical. You file 43 patents because you have seen the number. You have seen 500 kilowatts. You have seen the cost curve, and you have quietly concluded that the car your engineers are working on right now will be obsolete before it reaches the showroom floor. This is what an extinction event looks like from inside a legacy boardroom, not a catastrophe that announces itself with an earthquake, a quiet technical achievement shipped at volume, priced for the real world, that makes every assumption in your 5-year product plan incorrect simultaneously. The geopolitical dimension of this is something the establishment particularly hopes you will not notice. The EU has imposed tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles, not because they are inferior, not because they are unsafe, but because they are so technically superior at such a dramatically lower cost structure that European manufacturers cannot compete with them in an open market. That is what a tariff is when it is applied to a car that charges at 500 kilowatts. It is not trade policy. It is a confession. Washington is watching the same thing. The same administration that cannot decide whether TikTok is a national security threat is simultaneously watching Chinese electric vehicles begin their quiet infiltration of every market where tariff walls have not yet been constructed. And the engineers in those Chinese factories are not waiting for the political debate to conclude. They are shipping, quietly, relentlessly, without announcement. While the politicians debate tariffs, Zeekr has already delivered to customers in Norway, the Netherlands, Sweden, and Israel. The car that kills range anxiety is already on European roads. The customers who bought it are not anxious. They are not waiting. They pulled up to a charger, added 284 kilometers in the time it took to read one email, and drove away feeling something that no Model Y owner has ever felt at a charging station: contempt for the wait. Most mainstream automotive media will read about the Zeekr 7X, note the charging speed, note the range, and then write something like, "Impressive numbers, but Western buyers may be hesitant about a Chinese brand." That sentence has been recycled since BYD entered the market. It was recycled when Hyundai entered, when Toyota entered. Every outsider that eventually becomes dominant arrived through the same door labeled hesitant Western buyers. If you are watching eShock vehicles, you are not a hesitant Western buyer. You are the person who reads the engineering, not the marketing. You are the person who checks the watt-hours per kilogram, not the color options. You know that a brand is a story a company tells about itself, and specs are the truth it cannot hide. The Zeekr 7X tells the truth at 500 kilowatts. If you want to be the person in the room who understood what was happening before it became obvious, before the legacy manufacturers finally admit what they already know in their boardrooms, before the automotive press catches up to the engineering reality, subscribe. We do not read the press releases. We read the patents. We do not follow the narrative. We build it from the numbers up. The engineers at Zeekr decided 3 years ago that range anxiety would be dead by the time you read this. They were precise. The question is not whether the Model Y survives this. The Model Y does not know yet that it does not survive this. The question is how long it takes the rest of the world to catch up to what the engineers already know. The 500 kilowatt age is here. It arrived quietly. It always does.